هبتدي الدباجة الرسمية اللي نبتدي بيها دايما انها بنقول تحت رعاية صندوق التنمية الثقافية بينظم متحف أم كلثوم ورشة عمل مع الخبيرة الأيرلندية نولاج فيونجيل، أو الحقيقة زي ما قالت لي بقى هي اسمها نولاج فيونيل، بس الاسم أيرلندي بيتنطق باللغة الأيرلندية القديمة. والحقيقة عن موضوع يهمنا كلنا هو التنمية الثقافية في مجال الحوار الثقافي طبعا لمعايير مشاريع الاتحاد الأوروبي. وأنا بشكر الخبيرة على حضورها، وأحب أقول لكم نبذة عنها. هي خبيرة موسيقية وباحثة ومحاضرة، حصلت على ماجستير في علوم وموسيقى الشعوب من جامعة جولدن سميث بلندن، وحصل على بكالوريوس الفنون الموسيقية من جامعة NUI بكورك. حضرت في كل من قسم الموسيقى بجامعة ألستر ومعهد مايو بقسم التكنولوجيا والتراث. قدمت العديد من الأبحاث في مؤتمرات نظمها الاتحاد الأوروبي، خاصة في مواضيع أهمها التراث الموسيقي وحاجة هي بتسميها توليد الثقافة والصناعات الابتكارية. يمكن مصطلح توليد الثقافة ده هنتكلم عليه ونشوف إيه هو. هي المؤسس الأسبق وكذلك عضو تنفيذي ثم رئيس الشبكة الأوروبية للموسيقى والرقص التقليدي من سنة 97 لسنة 2005. عملت كخبيرة استشارية للهيئة الأوروبية التجارية الخاصة بأوروبا تراث مشترك، دي يعني لجنة منبثقة من الاتحاد الأوروبي، وعملت كأخصائية توليد الثقافة أو تجديد الثقافة في جامعة ألستر بشمال أيرلندا من 2003 ل 2006. بتشغل حاليا منصب مدير مكتب تنمية المشاريع البحثية في قسم الدراسات العليا بكلية الفنون الإبداعية والميديا، بيسموها جراد.
مساء الخير شكرا لدعوتي.
دي مساء الخير، شكرا لدعوتي.
Hello and welcome, and thank you all for coming this afternoon. I'm really impressed by the turnout on such a pleasant afternoon in Cairo. I thank Nala for all her work in bringing us together here. It's been tremendously helpful to work with her, and I'm certainly looking forward to our maybe establishing ideas for working together again in the future. I understand that you have a great interest in being able to perhaps look to research or project funding, particularly to do with European Union or UNESCO or international association agreements. And I thought a little bit about how best I might be able to assist in this conversation. And, you know, sometimes it's easy to get project officers to come and give us the rules and to give us the regulations and tell us what needs to be done. But it's more difficult to know how to take an idea that's absolutely important to you and that has the potential to maybe make quite a transformative effect on your community and bring that into something that's a very competitive proposal, be it either research or for a cultural institution. So what we thought, how I work and how I manage to evolve these ideas. So it just gives you a more normal inside view of how these ideas come together. And then for the second half, that we will look at some ways in structuring ideas and also the kind of projects that you might like to see developed and how I can feed back. So it becomes more of a two-way conversation. And so I'm going to start initially, and this talk you can look at in a couple of different levels. On one level, it's a conversation about cultural policy, about an art form, and then a conceptual frame in which you try to bring those together. But on another level, it's also about finding ways to understand how our cultural practices can in some way transform the way we work and the way we live and how we understand each other, and how those cultural practices can be enlivened and animated when we start to look outside of ourselves and look to what others are doing and how our cultural perceptions evolve. So on one level, it is about project development and project proposals, but on a deeper level, it's more about human development and advancing our own ability to speak into that space.
الأسئلة اللي احنا مش عارفينها طبعا يعني نحاول. اتفضل.
حضرتك في قضية غاية في الخطورة حضرتك أثرتيها، اللي هو التعامل مع التراث. احنا بالنسبة لنا في المجتمع الشرقي يعني في مصر والشرق الأوسط بصفة عامة بنتعامل مع التراث بحساسية مفرطة. يعني ما نقدرش نعمل اي حركه ناحيته او اي ديستورشن يجي ناحيته، ممكن يعني يبقى في رد فعل غاضب جدا 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 من المجتمع. يعني حتى ما بنتكلم اذا كان في مجال الحرف التقليديه او في مجال الحاجات الشفهيه اللي هي الحكايين او اي شكل من اشكال الثقافه، بنتعامل معاه بمنتهى الحرص، وبننقل اذا كان التجربه بتاعتنا هنعملها تجربه حديثه او تجربه ذاتيه، بنبين للجمهور ان دي تجربتنا احنا، انما بناخد قالب او بنتعامل مع اي حاجه قديمه بنتعامل معاها بشكل يعني في تحفظ، او باننا نبينها للجمهور بان هي شكلها كده، احنا لقيناها كده. فيعني لو حضرتك تنقل لنا تجربتك او اللي ممكن نعمله عشان نبعد عن الخوف ده. شكرا.
يعني احنا كده بنتعاون مع مفاهيم خاصة بالحرية.
Any of us who are involved in traditional cultures will always deal with this. It's a real struggle. There isn't an easy answer, but not by any means. And it's very much contextually based, you know, in terms of how you do it and where you do it. But I have experienced some situations which I found quite tragic because of the loss of opportunity. And I've experienced other situations which are quite innovative and witty and clever, and sometimes they work just as well too. But I'll give you two examples. For a period of time, I worked in the Arts Council in Ireland as the music specialist. So this would have been essentially the position whereby you'd make the decisions about what music organisations would receive funding from the National Arts Agency. And at the time, a gentleman on the council wanted to see that artists who had interpretive and performing artists of a high level would receive an honorarium. So we have this system in Ireland called Éistóna, where our composers and our filmmakers, and it's a group of it's a number of, I suppose, highly acknowledged artists are given a stipend that they live on so that they can work on their art full time. And we also wanted to create a honorarium for interpretive and performing artists, because the other was very much based to do with originating work. And this brings up a whole lot of other discussions as well. But one of the real difficulties was that, and it came from within the members on the council who were from a traditional background, where they argued that they didn't see this honorarium having relevance to traditional artists because they weren't particularly in the artistic world. So I was an officer, so I couldn't really speak out, but it was a really problematic example of how this thinking can close our minds off to our capacity to engage in a creative and artistic way, in a viable way, as most others do. So that was a major loss of opportunity. Nothing could be done about it. Like, it was, you know, it didn't really go to a proper vote. It wasn't really well considered. But one or two members on an artistic council could wave away its importance with one or two sentences. So we have to be very, very careful about this idea of certain people holding that level of control. It's not a good thing. We need to critically discuss things and challenge and deconstruct them in such a way that we can change our minds along the way in case we've made a mistake, whether I'm the person who makes that decision or somebody else. Now, another example I had was, I worked for 3 years in Northern Ireland, and this was the last 2 years. It was towards the end of the conflict, and in the last 2 or 3 years of the Good Friday Agreement being implemented. The state was still going through a lot of instability. We weren't sure if the ceasefires were going to fail, and we go back into this kind of constant violence and affecting people's lives. And one of the real potential flashpoints for violence recurring were these political marches by one side of the community. The political marches are very much around celebrating the territorial subjugation of Ireland. So, of course, they kind of got up, they irritated the other side of the community in a very upfront way. And the more close we got to peace and resolution, the more those marches became intensified. So it would happen every summer, and there'd be all sorts of clashes. But the real problem was that the politicians joined in. And that was such a letdown for people in seeing their government representatives not really bind themselves into the principles of peace involved in the Good Friday Agreement. So how do artists and creatives engage on that? And that can sound very superficial, but it can have a long-lasting effect. And there are a number of examples like this that we can maybe discuss in the second half, you know, but...
أنا بس أقول حاجة عشان طبعا إحنا كنا يعني إحنا مقيدين بعدد السماعات الترجمة الفورية اللي موجودة في قاعة المجلس الأعلى للثقافة. أنا بقترح حاجتين إن ممكن يعني نبدل فيبقى كده بنفيد بعض وفي نفس الوقت نخلي الجزء الثاني الوركشوب نفسه دكتورة سارة تبقى معانا هنا يبقى ان ريل تايم من غير السماعات بحيث ان طبعا نقدر كلنا نوصل للفايدة يعني. فأتمنى ان انتوا تتعاونوا معانا ومتشكرة قوي. سؤال تاني اتفضل.
بعد اذنك. اولا انا بحيي الدكتوره والتجربه بس الاوروبيه في الحفاظ على التراث المصري. احنا كمجتمع كل التجارب او جزء من التجارب الحفاظ على التراث بتبقى تجارب شخصيه بدليل ان متحف ام كلثوم اللي احنا بصدده دلوقتي المتحف اصلا معمول مش في مكان بيت ام كلثوم لان الورثه أول ما توفت تخلصوا من كل شيء وعانينا عشان نجمع تراث أم كلثوم فساتينها أو أغانيها أو كانت لابسة إيه في الحفلة دي أو إزاي أقول إن ده دخل تراث وأنا كمجتمع وكأمة الشخص بيموت النهاردة تاني يوم أول حاجة بتخلص منها حاجته. أنا بتكلم سواء تراث شفاهي أو مكتبة أو لبس أو حجارة. ازاي انا كمجتمع اوروبي اجي اقول ده دخل تراث النهارده شخصيه ممكن تكون متوفيه امس تاني يوم امتى اقول ده دخل تراث قبل ما الورثه يتخلصوا منه. انا بتكلم على تجربه شخصيه خلي بالك.
يعني حضرتك بتسالها عن المعايير
ازاي انا اقول كمجتمع
المعايير الاوروبيه لتحديد ما هو تراث وازاي يعني المصدر السياسات
مش كده. هو انا لو رحت انا كشخص لو رحت لوزير الثقافه تاني يوم اقول له دخل الحاجه دي تبع التراث هيدخلني في مجاهل.
انا اظن ان ده ممكن يكون تبع البرلمان مش تبع الوزير.
شفت حضرتك بتقولي تبع
بس نشوف هي التجربه بس انا بس بحدد انا بحاول احدد مع حضرتك عشان طبعا الوقت.
انا بس عايز
السؤال ده بيهم ناس كتيره هنا وهو ايه هم المعايير اللي بيستندوا اليها مين القوى اللي بتشكل او بتحدد التراث
هل لازم فتره زمنيه تعدي هل لازم يكون اثر في المجتمع بوعي معين.
شكرا. هي هذا
It's always the local issues that get people going. There aren't benchmarks, you know. I think a group of people can decide something of cultural value and intrinsic artistic value themselves. If you want to benchmark these things, then it's possible that ministries of cultures in each country will implement their own agenda. And in the same way, the United Nations will have their identifiers for what they conceive to be an intangible heritage. In this case, you're talking about material culture and connected to an intangible heritage. So that's the best kind of answer I can give in this case because I'm very cautious about how much I can say about a particular scenario without investigating it in a more careful way. But that's generally how it's handled, if that answers your question. Now, maybe we can come back to some of these projects later. So what I'm going to do is just move in to talk about two projects that I won. One I won funding for, and the other is a project in development. And it'll just give you an example about how something which can be not necessarily even very high art, which can be quite an informal music making, can have quite an impact or an effect on policy making in itself. So, in order to maybe present this in a little bit more fast way, I'm going to take you through some slides. Now, I'm sorry these haven't been translated, but I will explain a little as I go on. So, first of all, creative policies for creative cities, it was a policy strand within the European Commission Cultural Agency. And it was very much around investigating cultural responses to civic issues for the city. So we identified amongst our three partners in the UK, a Spanish partner, and ourselves in Ireland, three very core, straightforward social problems in the city. And we were saying, we're going to get artists and creatives to think into this space and to come up with an innovative solution. So, first of all, we channeled the idea of multi-agency approach. How may culture-led policies and practices engage a diverse public in the regeneration of the civic space? But what we were essentially arguing for was, sorry, I'm just going to move through these here. We were arguing that if you get local authorities, if you get the academy by way of the university, artists and researchers, all of these people utilising their offer, like what they innately have, along with business people within an area, that you can come up with an innovative response. So we took, for example, the challenge of an area in the city which was becoming underused. It was a very charming, beautiful part just outside Dublin, a place called Dunleary. All the shops were closing down when the recession kicked in. A lot of people were immigrating and moving away, and the local authority really wanted to try and channel something different, something unusual, to start bringing people into the space. So we needed to come up with a new model, a new method that wasn't just going to be a once-off event. We also wanted to challenge concepts around this industrializing of creativity. In other words, if creativity is functioning as a product or a service, it's a good thing. So we didn't want to go down that road either, but we wanted to actually make a statement that we can engage in high-level artistic action, but in a way which is sustainable and which is looking forward to the future. So that if you look to European understandings around sustainable development, looking at culture as the fourth pillar of sustainable development, we need to look at what we're handing on to future generations. What are the messages we're handing on? So we were very aware of some of those issues, and we were aware of being used, so to speak, and that it would become very much around how many people can you attract into the area, how many hotel nights can you have, how many parking fees, and then get the musicians to do all of this, and then when everything is going well, up go the rents and nobody's capable of living in the area again. So all those issues were quite to our minds.
طبعا احنا بنتفرج، يعني المفروض ان دي كانت منطقه مهجوره، وكان البروجكت بسرعه كده بس بيحاول يعمر المنطقه ديت عن طريق ان هو بيربط كل الفنانين، كل فنان بيعمل الموضوع بتاعه. فانتوا بتشوفوا النتيجه الاخرانيه، يعني المجاميع دي جت مع بعض ازاي.
Okay, sorry to intrude there. I'm going to just wrap up in about 5 minutes, but before I do, I wanted to talk about the conceptual frame that begins to shift when you start to try to work in different ways. And a second project that I had begun to author last year, the idea of collaborating here in Egypt, called Sunesis, was about ways of knowing. So moving away from this idea of just ways of doing to ways of knowing. Now, I can maybe discuss that later or at another point, but what I want to actually talk about now is curatorial practice, research practice, and artistic development. That how we can, by integrating these elements, it suddenly becomes quite an interesting space. So awareness of international models, fostering dialogue, reflection, having a permeable place for engagement between artists, practitioners, but also in the public, so that there's a two-way conversation going, that it's not very much enclosed in our own professional boundaries, be it the academy, be it the local authority, or be it the artist in their studio. Is there a way in which we can actually program where critical reflection to address the kind of issues that you brought up earlier, or indeed yourself, where you can have all that intelligence coming together and beginning to unravel what the answer might be in the future, not necessarily the answer that I have right now or that another person might have, but that you can form a new question and new answers collectively together in this kind of way.
ما بنتكلمش في إعادة بناء مباني. احنا مش بنتكلم في إنشاء مباني. المشروع ما بيقومش على إنشاء مباني، لكن بيشتغل على تغيير سلوك بشري.
ما هي بتتكلم في كده.
هو لا، أنا اللي فهمته إن هو في إعادة بناء.
لا، إعادة
مشاريع
بناء
كبيليسيا
للعلاقة.
احنا بنتكلم على الريليشن بتاعت لكن هو عموما اختصارا احنا هنستهدف ده من خلال تشجيع انماط الابداع التفاعلي زي مسرح الشارع، مسرح شارع، حفلات موسيقية غير نمطية، أنماط موسيقية غير نمطية، مش حفلة بالمفهوم التقليدي، أساليب تشجيع أساليب الأداء التعبيري، الرسم
ما هو لو حضرتك كنت بدأت بأنك قلت الناس بتكسر في المباني كان الناس فهموا على طول.
وده والمشاريع دي بتقوم على إشراك الفرد داخل المشروع، مش شخص بيرى المشروع. احنا القدرة اللي بنشتغل بيها على المشروع دي قدرتنا وخبرتنا، هي بتقوم على ان احنا عندنا خبرة كبيرة في الإدارة الثقافية، وعندنا خبرة في مجموعة العمل يعني، وخبرة في مجال العمل الأثري. ومن مشاريعنا المهمة اللي بنشتغل عليها دايما في مشاريعنا فكرة جودة تحسين نوع الحياة من خلال التنمية الثقافية والإبداعية.
شكرا. طبعا يعني بصراحة احنا تعبنا جدا، والحاجات دي طبعا صعبة جدا. انا هقول بس ملخص بسيط، احاول انا حتى معاكم اشوف انا استفدت ايه يعني. اظن ان احنا اهم حاجة في اي بروبوزل هنكتبه ان احنا نقدر نعمله بشكل مركز وسلس وفي نوع من الاتجاه، ان يكون الانتقال السردي ما بين الاجابة عن الاربع اسئلة واضح، وده ممكن الواحد حتى يعمله ان هو يستعين بحد يقرا له ويقول له انت فهمت انا قصدي ايه. نحاول نبعد عن ذاتنا الفنيه شويه لان احنا كلنا عندنا نفس المشكله ديت، ونبعد عن المنتج ونبعد عن التقنيات، ورشات العمل، التشارتس، ونتكلم على الانماط السلوكيه او المشكله اللي احنا عاوزين نحلها. لو احنا عملنا دوت انا متهيالي كل بعد كده هيبقى سهل يعني، ودي هتبقى رحله شاقه. انا بشكركم جدا على انكم شاركتوا معانا، وبشكر نلاج جدا بصراحه يعني، ادت حاجات كتير النهارده. لازم اشكر دكتوره ساره عناني على الترجمه والتفاهيم.